My name is Bond.
James Bond.
James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
Any comments, 007?
007 is here, sir.
Very nice indeed.
On standby, approximately 2 minutes to go.
Control rod actuator standing by.
Stand by to transmit. Wait, out.
British Secret Service agent 007 James Bond is sent to Jamaica to investigate the murder of a fellow agent and his secretary. Upon his arrival, Bond experienced attempts on his life through an automobile crash by means of tarantula and by seduction of Miss Tarot. Bond, aided by American CIA agent Felix Leiter, links the murders to Dr. No, a mad scientist operating from Crab Key. And despite the natives' fear of the key because of the legend of a fire-breathing dragon, he persuades Quarrel to transport him there and assist him in the investigation. Landing, they encounter Honey, a blonde, bikini-clad shell hunter, and after they are spotted by Dr. No's patrol boat, Bond persuades Honey to join them. Trying frantically to escape, they are cornered by a flame-throwing tank, which kills Quarrel. Bond and Honey are captured and imprisoned in Dr. No's secret base, where they learn of his experiments to divert the course of rockets fired from Cape Canaveral. Bond escapes from his cell by means of a ventilator shaft and intercepts Dr. No just as he's ready to deflect another rocket. In a death struggle, Dr. No is killed. And Bond flicks every switch in the laboratory and that's stupid. Dr. No is killed, and Bond sabotages the laboratory. But just before the final explosion, he rescues Honey, and the two escape to live happily ever after. That sounds stupid. And the two escape.
It's fine.
And the two go off into the sunset.
Or how about the two escape to shag away the afternoon?
Right. I got kind of. For some reason, they go, he persuades Quarrel, a black man, to transport him. I'm like, so I kind of stuck. I'm like, why does that say that? I should probably read through these synopses before.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
1962's Dr. No.
Woo-ha.
And welcome back, Scott. How's it going, buddy?
It's going great. Thanks. I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about Dr. No.
Awesome. Oh,
That's third. Come on now. Yeah.
Oh boy! Wow, I'm feeling outdone. I should have a cocktail with me.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not kidding.
There you go.
Oh my goodness! What am I? Oh, totally outdone, outshined. Well played, my friend.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness! This is why you're so much fun. I didn't know you were drinking over there when we did podcasts.
Now you know my secret. Ancient Chinese secret, huh?
Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, bottoms up. Let's talk about Dr. No, my friend.
Let's. Great movie. You know, I was watching, in preparation for this podcast, vlog, whatever you want to call it. I sat down and watched it. I hadn't seen the movie in quite a few years now. I kind of do that with movies sometimes. I kind of give them a little breathing space, even though I love them, because I've learned in the past there's a few, there's certain movies like Pulp Fiction and a couple others where I kind of overwatch them. So I kind of want to keep a little bit of a distance. Then I like to go back and attack them with fresh eyes. And this was the perfect opportunity to do that with Dr. No, because I sat down and watched it the other night and I loved it. It was just a great movie to come back and revisit.
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. I kind of feel like this is going to be it's going to be a nice film to start off with because I really do enjoy this film, and I think a lot of people, especially younger audiences, they probably struggle with it a little bit. Oddly enough, I find its age to be one of its strengths, and what I mean by that is, it's interesting that people now are sort of 60s nostalgia has been pretty prevalent. Shows like Mad Men was one. The film Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio. The movies that are sort of pining for those days. Well, if you ever envisioned, if you ever thought about how they should do the James Bond as period films, do them in the time of Fleming, here you go.
Absolutely.
Here you go. This is it. This is literally it. I mean, when you watch the film, you start to already very quickly get a sense of, wow, this really is in the day when, just like world travel was rare, like this was a big deal. People would wear suits to travel because it was it was like a badge of honor, like there was some prestige that went with travel. Things that you could not do today. Like, again, I feel like films in general are so fascinated with the years past because we didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have cell phones back then. So now, it's like, well, how would you do detective work today? Well, you'd sit down and Google stuff, or or just get their cell phone records. I'll find out where they were. So so again, doing things back in those days, there's a level of excitement that I think is kind of lost today.
I agree. When I was watching this film, the famous opening scene in that nightclub, the first introduction to James Bond, I was kind of taken aback by, wow, everybody's all dressed and everybody looks great.
Yeah.
They're all wearing their best suits and their best dresses, and it just doesn't really happen nowadays. Everybody shows up in jeans and a t-shirt, and I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a bygone era that is kind of great to go back and revisit.
Totally agreed. It's funny, seriously, like today we live in an era where to do a James Bond film, you have to, they struggle to figure out, well, how are we going to get James Bond into a tuxedo? Where would he be that would call for a tuxedo? So they have to wedge in scenes that, it would lend itself and not feel weird. But back then, I mean, you dressed for dinner. That's it. You wore your best clothing.
And another thing that caught me too is in these older films, especially, when people come in and they go to have a conversation with each other, they're actually, they sit down, they have a drink, right? And they're smoking cigarettes. You don't have to ask if you can smoke. Everybody smoked, and everybody's like, and it's just like it's kind of a cool. I mean, people back then, they worked hard, and in many ways they had harder lives. But they also knew how to enjoy themselves, and that's something we kind of lost a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. In fact, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think James Bond is even more important. Is maybe not exactly the right word, but I kind of feel like, that wish for a simpler time when people, like you said, when they enjoyed themselves, it's so lost on us today. So, yeah, I'm with you 100% in that respect. So it is a bygone era, and I think that's that's the charm of this film, frankly.
It looks spectacular. I watched it in preparation for this. I watched it. I decided to do something a little different. So I just recently got a 4K television, and I got the 4K Apple TV, and I decided to get some of the Bond films in 4K, and one of them was Dr. No. And sitting there watching it, it was kind of an interesting experience actually, because it looked great in 4K. There was sometimes it got a little too dark as far as the 4K transfer goes, but overall it looked amazing. The colors really popped because I compared it to another Dr. No stream on Vudu and the Blu-ray as well. And I got to say, the 4K, for my money, as far as especially the color red, really pops.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you too. By the way, I mean it's a very visually pleasing film, and it is worth getting the new transfers. I remember when we first talked about the second go around with the DVDs. I think it was, or
yes,
I can't remember if it was that or the blue. Yeah, it was the second go around of the DVDs.
Yes,
when we really noticed this film.
Yeah,
popped.
That was the first time.
It was a dramatic difference. I remember the scene when Bond goes into Moneypenny's office for the first time, and the color in the room had sort of a rosy hue, if I remember right.
Yes.
Really did seem to pop all of a sudden.
That was the kind of the neat thing about the 4K that I noticed was that you notice more like the the material of what they're wearing, the suits and so forth, and you can really appreciate the fabrics. And if you want to go down that road, you can sit there and watch it and enjoy it as a film. But if you want to go just look at little different things, if you've seen the movie a bunch of times, you can sort of kind of discover different things. It's neat.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the behind the scenes stuff, because again, I know that you love this sort of stuff and you have a good eye for the crew behind the scenes and what makes this film work. One of the things that's amazing to me about it is how many things back in 1962 they got so right that they stuck with us for years.
I think a lot of that has to do with Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. They were it's the crew they assembled. They chose. Well, what happened was, let me back up a little bit. Terrence Young and Albert Broccoli actually had a relationship before this. Albert Broccoli he had a company called Warwick Films, and Terrence Young had worked on a couple films with him. And so when they decided to do Dr. No, Broccoli was like, hey, I know a guy, Terrence Young. He's going to be perfect for this. And in many ways, Terrence Young was, because he was kind of like a real-life Bond in himself. Bit of a womanizer, like the good life, if you will, the drinks and the fine suits. He primarily, the way he dressed Sean Connery was amazing, because he took him to his tailor. Those suits, I think, the stuff that Connery wears in Terrence Young James Bond films are like, for my money, the best outfits in the entire series. The best suits and everything. He had a real eye for that. Like for me, Guy Hamilton, not so much. Didn't really like his taste. He was more trendy, and I think that's the reason. I think Terrence Young went for the classic suit look, which never really goes out of style.
Agreed. I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I remember one of the things I noticed was that, maybe except for the pleats and the pants are a little high, but other than that, that suit that Bond is wearing is something that anyone would wear today.
Oh, absolutely. And watching this, I keep bringing up this stupid 4K thing, but that was a thing that I really kind of noticed watching it this time, was like, wow, that suit is amazing.
Right? It really is. It's odd how timeless it is. Again, I kind of feel like it's a tribute. When you do a Bond film right, they don't age. They really do sort of live in this timeless state. Yes. The ones that really kind of go off the rails and try to jump on the current trends, they get outdated very quickly. But here, you're talking about classic style, like a very easy to absorb story, classic characters, and it doesn't go out of style at the risk of sounding cliche.
And they, Albert R. Broccoli formed this company, Eon Productions, as we all know now, with Saltzman. And they brought Terrence Young along. And originally, Terrence Young didn't want Sean Connery. Later on, he was, he was floored to have him in the film. And he became, I think he's quoted as saying that Sean Connery was his favorite actor. But at the time, he didn't want it. They looked at a bunch of different choices. They even toyed around with the idea of getting Cary Grant. The reason they didn't go with Cary Grant was that Cary Grant was like, I'm one and done. I'm not doing a series. Right. And they decided, well, that's not really what we want. So they it was all friendly and stuff, but they said, oh, we're not going to do that. And even at that early stage, I think Roger Moore was considered. But that didn't happen. So as we all know, Sean Connery came in. And at the time, he was called the truck driver because he had done a few films, but he wasn't really been taken seriously, in the film industry. So this was like his first big break. And, I think he gives a great performance in this. I think right out of the gate, he is fantastic in the movie. Just fantastic. I was watching the film and I was kind of struck by how his little facial things that he does and the subtle movements. He's really good at subtext. That was the thing that struck me this time watching it. Was just how damn good he was in the role.
Oh, totally. I couldn't agree more. And he wasn't. Terrence Young was not the only one that needed convincing, but Ian Fleming had
he didn't like it. No. I mean, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I know Ian Fleming saw like an early preview of Dr. No, and he just stormed out of the theater, said nothing, and went to the nearest bar, had a drink, and just I'm sort of paraphrasing. I don't know exactly what he said, but it's something like just dreadful. Hated it.
Yeah.
But I think near the end of his life sort of came around.
Oh, he absolutely came around.
Yeah.
Not only that,
Yeah.
but there's a reason. That's why in the novels, he even basically gave James Bond a half Scottish background.
Is that right? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the books, he actually, in the later books, he went back and he said that Bond was half Scottish.
No kidding.
And that was because of Sean Connery, yeah. So
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
That's why we watch these videos.
Good night, everybody. No.
Another interesting thing about Dr. No is that if it's lacking anything, or, one of the things that did not start with Dr. No was the pre-titles. You really don't get anything resembling a pre-title sequence. They jump right into the actual titles.
I think that's pretty much the first one, right? It's the only one, rather, that doesn't have pre-title sequence.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you could sort of argue that the Craigs
they do have
the Craigs, even the Craigs do. They're not
Yeah.
not traditional pre-titles, but but things happen before the actual title. So yeah, you're right. This is the only one.
And maybe Never Say Never Again if you want to get technical, I guess.
There you go. Well, we don't talk about that. Again, fascinating to me is that the gun barrel was done in Dr. No, and it was so iconic it stayed with us throughout the entire franchise.
Kind of, sort of. Yeah, no, it has. It really has. And it's one of those
kinda,
great
sorta.
things. I mean, and they tweak it later in other films, and they really get it to a point where it's just like this amazing little opening, like a trademark to their franchise, where it just gets you excited. It gives me goosebumps every time I see it,
Yeah. It really does. And it, again, does what the pre-titles, or does what the gun barrel should. It gets your blood going.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it is meant to give you a jolt of something.
Oh, absolutely. And, adding John Barry to the mix to do that, when you hear the James Bond theme and you see those white dots and you hear that, da-da-da. I mean, I'm like, I'm in already, no matter what happens, even if it's a View to a Kill, you got me pumped for 30 seconds,
There you go. It is interesting, though, that these titles, again, they start out strong with the Bond theme, and then they kind of get into all the Jamaican stuff.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to talk about is, we talked about, is it dated? Is this film dated? I think the one thing that does date the picture is the Monty Norman score. I'd have to say, if I'd have to give you one, I'd give you up one. I'd be like, okay, the score. I think it's definitely a product, kind of the fit. We're in the early '60s here, but that's kind of still kind of like very 50-ish. And don't get me wrong, there's some great scores from the '50s, like guys like Bernard Herrmann and Dmitri Tiomkin were doing fantastic work. But there's also with those, there's the greats, and then there's also kind of not so great. I don't hate the Monty Norman score. Sometimes it's very appropriate, and some things do work. There's actually a cue that they use. They reuse it in From Russia with Love, that I think is the Monty Norman. It's when when the Dr. No lair is exploding and so forth, and they're making good on their escape. I think they also use that. There's a music cue that they use with the helicopter scene. But that aside, I think that's the one thing that does date the picture a little bit. But the John Barry theme song is, forever classic and will never go out of style.
I totally agree with you there. I noticed as I was watching it, the like when the film ends, as the credits are starting to roll and the boat is just sort of going away, the music that kicks up there, it just feels so generic. It feels like I could be watching any other film from that time frame, and it would, you know what I mean? Like, it's just nothing very distinctive calling this a Bond finale.
Well, isn't it an instrumental of Underneath the Mango Tree?
Right as the first credits kick in, there's like a da 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 da, like just
I think that's an instrumental of the Underneath the Mango Tree, which they have many on the album. The album, like 5 Underneath the Mango Tree variations. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, which is like at the time you must. That's what film. Score collecting was kind of frustrating very early on because they always tried to make an album that would make sense out of context with the film,
Yeah.
So something you could put on a cocktail party or whatever.
Yes.
And but a lot of the dramatic undercues get lost, and it's only until recently where we really can get that kind of stuff now.
Then we are introduced to our characters, which is interesting. Well, first of all, you mentioned the introduction to James Bond, which is so iconic.
We didn't really touch on that though. That is so iconic though. And there's something I got to say about cool. I want to talk about cool for a second because there's cool and then there's cool because I think of a few actors have this charisma of cool. Sean Connery's one of them. I'd say Steve McQueen was another. Probably Bruce Lee would be another cool. He's one of those cool cats. But then it's really hard to find somebody that's, especially nowadays, that's that cool just because they are. They're not trying to be cool. They just are cool, And Sean Connery is one of those guys. He's got the suave sophistication down from the opening shot.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that everything about that. It's funny because we live now in an era of the action film where everything has to sort of be action-oriented. And I kind of feel like that, like you said, that sense of coolness has sort of fallen to the wayside and has been forgotten. Well, and that is such an iconically cool. I mean, the only thing even that comes to mind in recent memory would be like the Ocean's 11, the new one from Steven Soderbergh.
Exactly.
Has some just great cool moments. And
yes.
Again, all the Bonds today, we need to have Bond start off in an action scene to say this and I'm certainly not criticizing that because I feel like a rush of adrenaline is a great way to kick off the film. I mean, for the same reason we like the gun barrel and everything like that. So that all works. But this one with the Bond introduction just being cool as cool can be it's so amazing, and I can't think of anything since that has sort of lived up to that, really. Yes, okay, so then we meet our other characters for the first time. We get an introduction to Moneypenny, which we touched on, but boy, is that a great...
that was the thing I was noticing. I was noticing the chemistry between Lois Maxwell and Sean Connery in that, and it's fantastic, right from the get-go. It's just, they really had a wonderful chemistry from day one. It's just so terrific. It really is.
It really is, and it's amazing how it's sort of, again, it's a part of the legacy of Bond that has endured to this day. And it's great how that just kicks off. And it's almost odd because like when I love when he reaches in, he starts grabbing papers on the desk and she slaps his hand.
That's great, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like little things like that are just so great. I mean, automatically, like the comfort level is understood as that happens. Like he just sachets in, sits down practically in her lap. She slaps his hand, and he takes hers, and there's that little playfulness where he's singing even. So again, that familiarity, you understand that these are two characters who have known each other for a long time and are very comfortable with each other, and that's delivered so quickly.
And that's their thing. They flirt, they flirt big time with each other, and that's like their thing, and it's fine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Another thing from yesteryear that you will probably never ever see. Ever again.
No, because now it's always like, oh, well, let's not go down that road. But yeah, you're right.
Flirting at the workplace. Yeah, we don't do it anymore.
Okay. What I want to touch on, since we're talking about the Moneypenny, Lois Maxwell. I'd also like to point out like the supporting cast, how great the casting was.
Yeah,
I mean, you had that one, the lady that was, I guess, a Strangway's secretary. She's in the movie because she let her use her house. So
is that right?
Yeah. Because Terrence Young, they were trying to negotiate. They're trying to save money. At this point, it wasn't a sure thing or anything like that. It's just this little movie that they're making. And when you first watch it, you're like, ooh. Then when you talk about dated, she's overacting a little bit. She's kind of doing a little too much.
Yeah. There's an interesting little jump cut when she's right before she's murdered, probably for the reason you said. Probably, I think Terrence Young was trying to tighten that moment up a little bit, and the jump cut is a little jolting, frankly. Probably because she was overacting or just doing whatever. Oh my goodness! And so they had to sort of dial it down a little bit.
Peter Hunt's all about rhythm, and he doesn't really care about those jump cuts. And it's interesting you brought that up because I was thinking about that the other night. when you would go to see a movie, you'd see it on film back in the day. You know, it would be projected, and it would be in a projector, and it would actually be a very analog system, but it would go through the projector like a reel of film. And every now and then you'd go see a movie and you'd see missing frames and stuff. And it was just a normal thing. And you'd just be like, oh, I guess it's just the print, you know, I guess it's missing a frame. So you go see a movie. You didn't realize that was in the original negative. You just thought, oh, it's missing a frame, you know, no big deal.
Right, right.
It's the way it was back then, you know?
Right, yeah. And again, like you're not gonna watch the movie 10 times in a row before you even knew it, like you moved on to something else, so you probably just forgot it as soon as it happened.
Well, you'd see the movie.
Now we see it.
You see the movie, you know, in a reissue like 5 years later, and you wouldn't remember that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, you also mentioned the budget. It is shocking. The budget for this film was $1 million.
$1 million.
And they have Ken Adam to thank for that, who is the set designer, and he did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And would get bigger and even maybe arguably better in some of the later entries, but he does a fantastic job. Especially, to me, I think the real show in here for him in this one is the Dr. No lair. That set design is amazing.
Oh my God, agreed. The scene where Professor Dent is talking to Dr. No, where he picks up the tarantula, room. Wow, is that iconic? It's
a ridiculous use of space when you stop to think about it in real life terms. But you see it in the movie, like the light and shadow of it. Fantastic.
Oh, sure.
Fantastic.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then later, you know,
we have Ted Moore to thank for that lighting too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And the set later on when they're having dinner with Dr. No, I mean, that's a great set.
Oh, that's a great scene. You know what I realized about that scene? I was watching it the other night, and I realized, well, this is just an exposition scene. But it's so It's so brilliantly done, and it's so much fun, and there's so much subtext going on that you don't realize you're being dished a bunch of exposition.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Yeah. I totally
agree. And that's
the
way to do exposition. You got to add some conflict and stuff into it to make it palatable. If you're sitting there, let's all sit down and let me tell you what this movie's about. That is not fun. You know, it's not fun to watch. Not fun to do for the actors. You know.
And it's interesting too because by the time we meet Dr. No, you know, we're already like an hour and a half into the film, so it's almost like we have a little catching up to do with him.
That's the thing too. Is like in pictures and very quickly. I think I might have talked about this in the older podcast. I probably did, but you know, Orson Welles always talked about, you know, this buildup. Like he played this character called Mr. Wu at one point in this play that I don't know the name of. But, you know, throughout the play, they're talking about Mr. Wu, and I wonder what Mr. Wu would do, and I wonder how Mr. Wu's going to react to this. And then at the end of the first act, he walks out as Mr. Wu, and then the curtain closes, and everybody goes, oh, wow, that guy playing Mr. Wu's, you know, fantastic. He's magnificent. But, he, you know, all he did was walk out on stage. And the reason why is because the reaction is that it was a setup, you know. And Dr. No kind of works the same way. It's like, you know, we're talking about Dr. No, we're talking about Dr. No's files, and Dr. No has this island, and you know, everybody who talks to Dr. No doesn't seem to, you know, survive. And what is going on with Dr. No? And so by the time you meet him, it's like this big buildup, which is kind of fantastic for the actor, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I completely agree. And by the way, the only character that I think we'll get to them as we talk about story, but the one I want to mention before we get too far ahead was Bernard Lee as M. I think what a great bit of casting there.
Yeah. And this is a hard-edged M, and you know he's not. I guess you could call him the M that doesn't suffer fools lightly. I guess kind of M.
Right.
And Bernard Lee is fantastic. You know, veteran actor. That was the one thing. That's what I love about these British films, man, is that they got these great supporting casts. And they get them together because a lot of these people did theater and so forth, in the in the evenings and in the daytime, their gig was to do like maybe a James Bond film or a Hammer film or something. Maybe not so much a James Bond because of the location stuff and everything, but the supporting cast is fantastic, and Bernard Lee definitely tops that list.
So Bond gets sent down on a mission. He gets sent to Jamaica, so we get our first Bond location, which again I think is top notch. I think I love the balance of Bond. You know, I love the European locations, but then I love the offset. I mean, I'm sort of like fast forwarding a little bit and talking about like the franchise as a whole. I love the various locations around the world, but I love how they're offset with the tropical locations. And I think having Jamaica as like the first Bond location is such a great call.
Oh, it's a great conceit. And one of the things that I love, you get to see, like you said, the travelogue. The
Yes.
of not being able to. Back in the day, people didn't travel as much, so you get this. You walked into one of these movies and you were treated to these voluptuous women and these exciting locales. I mean, and the danger of being a secret agent. It must have been thrilling for people back in the days. Absolutely thrilling.
Right.
And, it's still thrilling today for me, because I don't get out
Totally.
that much.
It really is. I mean, honestly, it's amazing how just watching Bond in the airports, like Bond actually, when you watch the film, he arrives in Jamaica and they literally show like the control room or the tower,
Yeah.
as the plane's coming in and landing, like this was sort of a big deal. And then even as he's in the airport, when he meets his driver, and then he makes a phone call, like they seem to linger in the air. And then you have Felix Leiter, by the way,
Yes.
who's sort of lingering in the shadows.
Jack Lord.
Right? Yeah.
Best
I mean,
Felix
it's
Leiter by a mile. By
Oh,
miles.
totally. Yeah. But it's amazing how they do so much in the airport before they even leave. And I think part of the reason for that is because the airport itself was sort of an exciting location. I think people
That's a
just
good
being in an
point.
airport
I didn't
is,
think about that. Yeah, but you're right. Yeah.
and that's one of the things I love about this film too, by the way. You see him, literally doing detective work. He's interviewing people, following leads, asking questions, and a lot of that we don't get these days.
No.
It's almost kind of passe, maybe. I'm not sure why we don't get it, but we're so busy just sort of keeping the pace moving that I think the idea of Bond just sitting in a chair talking to people,
It's unacceptable.
maybe doesn't work. Right, doesn't work for today's audiences. I find it to be great, and I sort
do
of love
too.
that aspect of it. But yeah, and then by the way, there's also really great in terms of sort of like espionage stuff. All that great spy stuff, like when he's in the room, and he puts the
Yes.
talcum powder on the
love it.
suitcase, and
Love
he
it.
puts the little hair on the closet doors,
That's great stuff.
right? And again, that's stuff that we don't see a lot of today. And again,
No.
I'm wondering why that is, but boy, did they do a great job here. I mean, I love that sort of stuff.
Oh, I love it too. And that's the thing too. I mean, they didn't have the money to just, do all these crazy, especially in this being the first one, to do all these special crazy action scenes, So they had to sort of rely on those kind of scenes and the great actors that they hired to pull it off, and to tell the story.
We meet sort of our, we've already met, our characters who will be here throughout the franchise, but now we're going to meet Quarrel. We're going to meet Felix Leiter. Like you said, Felix Leiter, best Felix Leiter ever,
Oh,
easily.
he's great.
I've never heard this confirmed for sure, but my feeling was always that after Dr. No, they toned down Felix Leiter because they didn't want to outshine James Bond.
Well, what I
Because
heard,
this
that's possible.
Felix Leiter is just top notch.
What I heard was that Peter Hunt has been saying that we tried to get him, but he got too big for us. He had done a lot of work after that, and I think in '68 he started Hawaii Five-0, which ran for 12 long years, like 261 episodes or something like that. Crazy, but and by the way, a great show. I actually went back and I started watching them, like on DVD. This is going back a few years ago because of his association with James Bond being in this film. I loved Hawaii Five-0. I started watching this and I was going through those seasons like warm butter, and I was like, oh, I get why this show lasted 12 years. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, he really was just spectacular. And again, I hate it's odd because again, if they say that they didn't bring him back because they couldn't get him, but they really went the other direction when they bring him back in Thunderball.
And
not Thunderball,
right.
Goldfinger.
Yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, I also heard too is that he was. I think they asked him for Goldfinger. I'm not 100% of this. This could all be rumor. Who knows? But he asked for too much money, and they said no. And he said, "Okay, goodbye."
Right.
That was at the end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of a shame. We had a
Yeah.
really. I mean, he was a
Oh,
character.
yeah.
I would have loved to seen him return over and over the way.
At least do the
way,
Connery ones. That would have been cool.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we had Bernard Lee. We had Lois Maxwell. It would have been nice to sort of finish that off with the same Felix. I mean, I think we had the Desmond Llewellyn, of course.
Yes.
So yeah, it would have been nice to have a little continuity in that respect. But that's again, there's a lot of like the what ifs in the world of James Bond.
yes.
That's one of them, I guess. So I also kind of wanted to sort of talk about the again, I sort of mentioned that I wanted to address romance in the Bond films. And again, at first glance, it's like, well, there's only a handful, if that, or that really applies. But I do feel that the dynamic between Bond and his female co-stars still plays, a pretty significant role. And I do like the relationship that Bond has with Honey Rider in this.
I do too. She has a weird, almost childlike innocence to her. I mean, she seems like, it's weird because, she said she studies the encyclopedia and so forth. And she does seem to be knowledgeable, but yet she's like innocent and kind of naive. It's an interesting character. It really is.
Yeah.
And then the way the Bond and her react to each other is really great.
I completely agree. I feel that it's interesting when the screenplay is smart enough in this film to give us a character that is smart, intelligent, but not knowledgeable.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I don't know how they did that, but they pulled that off.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of films that can't do that very well because there are many, like fish out of water type characters, and sometimes they get that right and sometimes they don't. And here they do. Again, they do not, they don't play her as dumb.
No.
But certainly somebody who does not have the world of knowledge that Bond has, and Bond has to take the role of protector. And again, that sort of falls into one of the things that Fleming is sort of notorious for talking about, is that he liked the winged dove character.
Yes.
Where, the woman has been hurt, has been damaged, so Bond takes that role. And again, something we really don't get a lot of today, because the emphasis is on strong, capable women, and there is certainly a time for that, and the Bond series is rich with strong, capable women, I think.
Agreed.
But it is nice to find someone who also needs rescuing once in a while. And I mean, again, we are men who go to these movies. We'd like to sort of, have that feeling. So I do think the dynamic here is terrific and works perfectly.
I'd also go one step further, and I say there's a lot of women out there that like to see women rescued.
I would agree with that as well too.
I would say, yeah.
I it's amazing I'll leave it at that and agree with you and say yes. I agree that is true, and I wonder if female moviegoers are being served with this current trend.
Let us know in the comments.
I'll let someone else. Yeah, right.
We should give props to Quarrel, because I think this is a great Quarrel, the best Quarrel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Such a likable character.
Right?
It's
John Kurtzmiller.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just an amazingly likable character. I kind of feel like it's a role that in the wrong hands would have been a very thankless role. But boy, does he really make that his own, and really you get another relationship that is just so enjoyable.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like they're sort of butting heads when they first meet, and he's like, he's really stonewalling him and just walks away and stuff. I mean, that's great stuff, and he's really good. And they're hardcore though, man. Like when the camera girl, the way he's twisted around there. I mean, there's no nonsense here, man.
Oh my God,
they're playing for keeps.
But yeah, talk about hardcore. I mean, they bring her to the table. She slashes his face with the broken glass, and he barely flinches. He wipes his cheek off and says, "Should I break her arm?"
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And you understand why they do that, and why Bond can be like that sometimes. This is like life and death stuff, and these people are they're trying to kill him left and right. And he wants to get to the bottom of it, and he'll do any means necessary to do that. And that's something you kind of have to keep in mind, Yeah,
it is amazing, and especially in that scene in the nightclub too, because you never really get such a hardcore Bond anymore, where he's like just so serious.
No,
get that girl, and Crab Key. Why can't we go there? And Connery's just got this kind of gruff, expression, this grimace. In fact, I've often looked back on that scene and thought, I wondered if the filmmakers sort of realized that there might be a course correction needed in how Bond is sort of portrayed, because Bond seems like very rough and very serious, And then they cut to Jack Lord, who's just so cool and you know what I mean?
It's another day at the office kind of thing,
Right, like he's just smooth. He's like totally smooth, and here's James Bond like real serious. And
Right.
I wondered, like, did they look at that and say maybe we should play it a little more like how Jack is playing it?
That is a good point. I never thought about that. You might be right. You might be onto something there.
All right, which brings us to it's time to give it an official score. We have to commit. So, Scott, do you want to go first?
This is a tough one. Well, maybe not so tough. Only because there's other films in the series that I think are a little better overall for me, for my personal taste. I'm going to give this a 9.
Wow.
Yeah. It's classic, man. It's got some classic stuff in there. You have the introduction to James Bond. The first time we hear the James Bond theme, you have Jack Lord as Felix Leiter. Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No is fantastic. You got the Jamaican locales. They're just so, and we're talking about the character of Quarrel, Ursula Andress, Honey Rider. So many iconic moments. I wanted to talk about too. Orson Welles was quoted as saying that there's 2 great introductions in the cinema. One of them was Omar Sharif and Lawrence of Arabia, and the other one was Ursula Andress and Dr. No when she first makes that appearance. And I don't know if that's true or not. It sounds cool, but yeah, I'm kind of in agreement. This is great stuff, and. Some might say it's still dated here and there, and maybe around the edges a little bit. Primarily the Monty Norman score, but overall, this is a great movie.
Well, when you said 9, I kind of realized, boy, I'm probably going to be the one who's a little harsher on these films.
Okay.
Because
probably these early ones, it's gonna flip. It's gonna flip.
Right. I'll say this: I don't have any that are a 0. I figured as long as it's a James Bond film, it gets at least a 1. But I did sort of grade on a curve where my least favorite is a 1, and my top favorite is a 10.
Right.
So basically, sort of with that in mind, I gave this one an 8. Which honestly I thought was going to be probably a little more positive than your average Joe would give it. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you that I think this is a terrific film. It's a lot of fun. I love the fact that it is set in the era of Fleming in the early 60s, in a time where spying and espionage was quite different than it is today. The locations are great. The story is great. The villain is great. There are so many things about this film that are wildly iconic that have stuck with us today and have not changed at all. There's elements in this film that have been barely updated for modern cinema, frankly. So yeah, I think this is one of my favorites. It's up easily in my top 10, and I'm gonna give it an 8. And again, like I said, we were not gonna give it the 8 point something, but honestly, it would be sort of a high 8. So I think we've started our series on a pretty positive note. We're very, very happy with this one. We enjoy it very much. So this is a great one to kick off the series.
I just wanted to show off a little bit the old Criterion Laserdisc of Dr. No from back in the day. Here, this is actually the one that was the CAV version that has the commentary that the producers Albert Broccoli wanted pulled because of some of the comments that Terrence Young and Peter Hunt and Richard Maybaum were talking about. I guess they're a little too frank, but I'm sure that the commentary is out there on the internet somewhere. But this is really nice. It's like kind of Laserdisc was sort of like in case some of you don't know what a Laserdisc is, I'll take it out of the thing. It's like a big record album, really, basically. Yeah. And that's a Laserdisc.
Wow. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I know, right? This actually has a gatefold if you want to see it real quick.
Sure.
It kind of opens up like that.
Oh, that's nice.
Isn't that pretty cool?
Yeah.
And you got your gatefold going on here and the little gun barrel in the center. And
awesome.
Pretty cool, huh?
Very cool.
Bygone era.
It really is. Yeah. All right. So I guess that'll do it for this episode of Being James Bond Reviews with Joe and Scott. Again, back in action after many years of starting out doing Bond
Yeah.
reviews. So going strong. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast, and can't wait to do more of them.
Same here. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Me too.
So, Being James Bond reviews will return.
James Bond.